I'm looking forward to this directive.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Tobago CSI. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Degazo of the Citizen Security Program. Today, in this episode of Tobago CSI, we explore the issues of child sexual abuse and incest. It is a horrifying experience for a child when the persons who are entrusted in caring, protecting, and nurturing you instead abuse and rape you. Today, we will explore the reasons why abuse happens, what is the abuse of the child, what is incest. We look at the legal perspectives of it, the cultural norms as values that sometimes we nurture that predispose our children to situations of abuse. Our technical panel will explore the options, the signs, the symptoms. How do you identify when abuse is taking place? The medical situations that we need to take into consideration. How do we protect our children from the scourge of the abuse that seems to many to be very, very pervasive in our Tobago society? We'll take a break now, and when we return, we will be joined by our psychologist, Dr. Sharon Brown, our medical doctor, pediatrician, Dr. Jillian Wheeler, and Officer Mills of the Child Protection Unit. Stay tuned with us. We'll be back.
I'm looking forward.
Right now I'm talking to myself, but I ain't even hearing me. It's like my voice of reason ran away with my sanity. And by rehearsing these lines in these mirrors, it won't change my destiny. As every time I get the urge to leave, he grab me by my weave and tell me without me he can't breathe. I guess my love is his oxygen. But another day in this house with this man is like inhaling nitrogen. How did I end up sleeping with the enemy?
If you are a victim or perpetrator of domestic violence, please call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-SAVE, 800-7283. A message from the Ministry of National Security's Citizen Security Program. Stop the violence and abuse. Stay calm and start thinking.
Remember, we don't want to know who you are. We just want your information. Crime Stoppers. It's safe and it works.
I'm looking for a new direction.
Welcome back to Tobago CSI. For those of you who are viewing at home and to our live studio audience, before we went to break, we indicated that we are discussing today the issue of child sexual abuse and incest that somehow is pervading our communities in Tobago. We have with us today our technical panel, Dr. Sharon Brown, psychologist, Dr. Jillian Wheeler, our pediatrician, resident pediatrician, and we have Officer Damian Mills of the Child Protection Unit. I want to welcome you to Tobago CSI.
Thank you.
At this time, I want you to share with our viewing audience a little bit about yourself. Sharon, you have been with us before, so tell us something.
Well, my educational journey, it started off with medical social work and working with an AIDS outreach program with Dr. Cheryl Holder. And then after that, going into mental health and then furthering my education degree, my doctorate, and working with students and also in the community, children and families.
Wow.
And then now I'm at USC, University of Southern Caribbean, teaching psychology.
Yeah, and we so appreciate the wide background that you have. You've really been bringing some valuable information to us on Tobago CSI. Now, Dr. Wheeler, you're a fresh face with us. So tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay, good morning. Well, I'm a pediatrician. I came back to Tobago after specializing in pediatrics back in 1997. Okay. And I worked at the Scarborough Hospital as a pediatrician, headed up the department there for a number of years, up until a year ago. Oh. So I'm now in private practice. Okay. I was on the adoption board for a short period a few years ago. And So I have encountered these issues both, at the hospital and in private.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know we go way back, and
Yeah.
so I know that your expertise is very, very valuable to us. Thanks for coming on Tobago CSI. Officer Mills, you look quite stately today. Tell us.
Well, I'm Damian Mills. I'm a police officer attached to the Child Protection Unit within the Tobago Division.
Right.
I've been a police officer for the past 13 years. I've worked within several sections and stations within the service. However, at this time, as I said before, I'm currently attached to the Child Protection Unit, and we're stationed at the Old Grange Police Station at this present point in time.
All right, good. So thank you again for joining us today. Now, we're talking about child sexual abuse and incest. And I know from your experience it's an issue that, I guess that's why we're a little bit sober today on this set, because it's a topic we really want to talk about, but we must. So I want to invite us to take a look at a video clip of a situation, and we will use that to start off our discussions on set.
Relax, right? Daddy has Spanish cover with you. We'll study Spanish together later.
My
Okay?
girl,
Yes.
if she does not change her approach to Spanish, she's not going to pass it.
Relax.
Please, can I go on the laptop, please? Can I say no? Daddy, say
Hey,
yes.
yeah, you could go on the laptop all you want. Where your rooms for that?
Thank you, Daddy.
Toodaloo.
Hi, Daddy.
Hey, baby girl. How you doing?
Just on Facebook.
What you doing on Facebook? Who you talking to?
Just talking to Mandy.
Mandy? Could you put away Mandy for a second? Talk to Daddy a bit.
Okay.
Let's put away Mandy. You know, I've been thinking. How wonderful my baby girl looks. Relax, 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 relax. Okay? You don't need to move right now. Just stop, stop.
Daddy, please
Stop.
not. Daddy, please
Sweetie.
not.
So you just be
Daddy, please. Please, not
The
sleep.
mommy's out there. Shut up. Just could you relax, okay?
Okay, just a reminder to those of you who were looking on at home, we did have to blur the images for obvious reasons to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. Officer Mills, I want to go to you first with this. What offenses were committed here?
Well, looking at the video, we have to be a bit presumptuous in that it was cut. And I guess, that's for a certain reason. But we're seeing, coming out there, he started by telling her how she was beautiful and how she was pretty. And that there's an offense called sexual grooming. All right? So he started grooming her, trying to get her, to break the barriers. And then he started touching her. Right? He touched her on her cheeks, on her neck, and that sexual touching is one of the new offenses that came out of the new Act 12 of 2012 that was passed early 2015.
Right.
And then if in truth and in fact there was sexual intercourse, there's an offense called sexual penetration of a child. All right? So it's no longer called or referred to as sexual intercourse. Under the Sexual Offences Act, it would be sexual intercourse with a female under the age of 14, and what have you. But now it has been called straight off the bat sexual penetration, which carries a very steep penalty of life imprisonment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I want to go back to the first one you mentioned because I think it's new to us and a lot of people may not understand what it involves. Could you elaborate a little bit more about this sexual grooming?
All right, so sexual grooming is a situation where a perpetrator would try to break all the barriers that would have a child be a little bit reluctant to give in sexually to him or her,
Right.
or his or her request.
Right.
So you start off by telling the child, you're pretty, you're beautiful, I'm here for you, anything you want. He'll try to befriend that child.
Right.
Sometimes it could take months, on end before actually getting into the sexual aspect of it with the child. So it's telling the child things to come on and to buffer the child's mind in terms of getting the child ready for the next step, which is sexual intercourse.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And for grooming, what are the penalties? You mentioned that it was live for penetration. For grooming and touching, what are the penalties associated with that?
Well, for the grooming aspect of it, I believe the penalty is somewhere around 10 to 15 years imprisonment. And those, majority of the penalties under the sexual aspect of the act carry what you call fine and confine. So there's a fine and there's a jail term that goes with it.
Okay.
All right. For the sexual touching, well, there are two separate areas of the sexual touching. Right. The sexual touching, if it involves the touching of a child on the penis or the bodily orifice of that child, that's a life sentence.
Okay.
And if it's touching of any other parts of the child, whether in or out of clothes, that's 20 years imprisonment. That's under Section 19, to be exact, of the new act.
This almost begs the question for you to tell us then, how prevalent is child sexual abuse and incest then in Tobago? From your experience?
From my experience, what I would say, well, we started in May of 2015. And one would have to wonder, you know, aside from the work that the various station districts would have been doing prior to the commencement of operations of the Child Protection Unit, one would have to wonder what used to happen, where these reports, you know, were made and what, you know, children or aggrieved or victims used to do in terms of justice.
Yeah.
Because since we have started, we have been overwhelmed with reports of child sexual abuse, sexual penetration. The most two prevalent are sexual penetration and sexual touching. That's the two most prevalent ones that we're seeing happening, even up till recent times.
So I want to ask you from a legal perspective, from your perspective, and then I want to go to you, Dr. Brown, maybe from a psychological perspective. First, to understand why, even though the penalties are so stiff, as we would want to say, that we still have such high prevalence of the abuse.
Well, you have to take into consideration, we're dealing with children here. And perpetrators know that they could, or they have a stronger chance of getting to children as opposed to an adult. So they would have sexual intercourse with these children, and sometimes, or a majority of the times, they would threaten these children. And they are almost assured of the fact that these children will not say anything. We have come across cases where children refused to give us evidence. We know based on the signs that we are seeing, what their body language, you know, whilst interviewing them, we know. Right. But just knowing would not suffice. We need the direct evidence. Okay. And for several reasons, we have, for example, as we have seen in the video, father-daughter. Yeah. So the daughter would be reluctant to give evidence because she would know, or she would believe that if I give evidence against my father, he would be arrested, and he is the sole breadwinner of the home. The father would know that. We have stepfathers doing, you know, perpetrating these acts against their stepchildren because they know that the children will not or may not be so willing to give the necessary evidence to the police because it would mean a jail sentence for them. And, you know, it's generally easier to tell a child, don't say anything. Right. And be assured. The
intimidation,
yes,
the control.
They will intimidate, they will control the psyche of these children based on the nature of the situation. You know,
that's a good point to get over to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown, what's happening here? I'm not even going to the child yet, but what's happening with the person who is now perpetrating this violence in spite of the possibilities of prosecution and what it's doing to the child? Why does it happen?
It could happen for a number of reasons. In many of the cases I've worked with, sometimes the perpetrator themselves, they were also violated when they were younger. So now that they're older and they would tend to do the same thing, it could just be control. Many times it's control. It's very selfish in nature because you're not thinking about what it's doing to the child. It's almost like, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to get. And if you say anything, I can hurt you or I'll make this happen to you. And when you really think about it, is there really one reason? Many times there isn't. Every case is different. But overall, usually these people are sick. They're not thinking of the responsibility that they have as parents to protect, provide. And it's just like, I want this, and this is what you're going to give to me. If you say anything, I'm going to hurt you. So.
Right. Dr. Wheeler, let's get you to weighing on this. This picture, I'm sure it's something that you have seen. Give us your first reactions, and then I want to ask you, from a medical perspective, what's been your experience? How prevalent is it? Is it a real issue for us?
It is a real issue. The prevalence, it would be difficult to say because, as Officer Mills said, many cases are unreported. They're underreported. The children may be threatened or they may be bribed or, because of the love of the parent. But the perpetrator sometimes, as, they may have gone through that as a child, and it's a cycle, and it may not be that easy for them. They may feel remorse at what they do, and they may not be able to control it without, therapy and so on, and even in that situation. Now, the video showed something that makes it very difficult to prosecute these cases because, as Officer Mills said, sometimes, the perpetrators, they will spend a long time in preparing a child. And only, we think it maybe just be quarter of the cases where there's actually penetration.
Yeah.
So cases may just involve somebody touching the child or having the child touch them.
Yes.
And there's no physical evidence really. So actually in these cases, 9 times out of 10, there's actually no physical evidence. Even
because
in the case of penetration.
that's the next question I was going to ask you. It's right here.
Yes.
So how do you know?
Right, because 9 times, even with penetration, children and teenagers, they heal very quickly. You can have somebody who actually might have been raped, and you examine them again in a month, and you'd be amazed that there is no sign, everything has healed, the tissues have regenerated. So one of the things that they rely on, if there is presence or absence of the hymen, that actually it's not really proof. It could be there, it could not be there. The child may be a victim. Because most of the cases, it's not a violent act in the sense of rape.
Right.
It's something where the child has been prepared over a period of time, and then it's repetitive. And then sometimes when you actually may find out about it, the last incident, there may be nothing to find. So it's really having someone say, whether it's a child or an adult or another child, someone else who has witnessed, to be able to come forward and to say, well, this took place, because there may be no physical evidence. When there's physical evidence, it's easy, if it's a female, if they get pregnant or they get a sexually transmitted infection, depending on the age, or, if you find the presence of semen, then it makes you have the evidence. But 9 times out of 10, you may not have that physical evidence. And this is why it is so easy for perpetrators to be able to, they may get away, because sometimes even if the child says something, I'm sure Officer Mills knows this. If a child is 6 years old, I have heard of a case where there was a 7-8-year-old child who was quite intelligent and who could say, this happened to me, this person did this. And because there was no adult to corroborate it, it was not accepted.
Well, I hope Officer Mills will tell us that those things have changed with the new laws that we have, which we will get into a little later on. So, Dr. Wheeler, then, how do you, with such little hope but the evidence to prosecute, how?
So you try, you want to sensitize persons, just like what you're doing here, and let children know, because this can happen from babies coming right up. Let people know, let children know, you said, good touch, bad touch. Let them know the names of their body parts, so that when they know the names of their body parts and they see somebody touch me, or this person did this, or they make me touch this, you know what they're talking about. We all using the same language, right? You don't have any special words, or so that they can say, and let them know that it is wrong. Believe it or not, there are children who are experiencing this. who don't know that, somebody they make it like a game. It's a special game that we have, you and me, it's special. You're special, and they may not even know that it's wrong. There are people who, when they were older, they realized, but wait, this that was happening is not something normal.
Right.
So sensitizing and letting people know the repercussions of, letting this go along. You have a teenager, you're always reading in the paper or in the media about this teenager that ran away.
And
or this teenager that killed themselves, committed suicide. Or we say, oh, she hot, she just thinks she promiscuous and so. But how did that happen? These are the consequences.
Okay, now you're raising some very interesting things. We have about a minute before we go to break. And I want to just highlight an issue that we raised. This is not only happening to females. It's happening to boys because, as Dr. Brown, you pointed out, if it's a cyclical thing that's going on, it means the males who are now abusing, it's likely that they were abused as children. Is there anything particular that we need to consider for males or young boys who are being abused?
When I grew up in Tobago.
Yeah.
And people took care of girls and they look out for their girl children because, I guess people always knew that this thing was happening. It's just that we're more aware of it now. People are speaking out about it. And you didn't worry so much about the boys because you figure nobody interfering with the boys. So I was actually very shocked way back in the year 2000 when a mother whose child was in the hospital came and was hustling to get back home and said that she had to go home because her little son, who was 3 years old, was being abused by his stepbrother. And so this happens, and then that really opened my eyes to the fact that, boys were also, and boys are victims, and boys are even less likely to speak up than girls because, and also, they would be even more ashamed of, as a boy that this is happening and they would feel powerless and who do they turn to and how do they and then it's less likely, a boy is not going to get pregnant.
That's right.
So, but it's happening with boys. Boys are just equally at risk. And I'm telling you about a story of a 3-year-old boy. Yeah. So we're not even talking about a teenager.
The ones who are older. Okay, it's a lot to take in. We have to go to break right now. When we return, we invite some comments from our studio audience and we take a closer look at the persons who are the victims. What's the issue for them? Medically, legally, psychologically? What's happening? Let's take a break now.
No, I'm not ready for that.
Stop. Stay calm. Start thinking.
Okay, cool.
Later.
A message from the Ministry of National Security's Citizen Security Program. The decisions you make today influence your future. You determine where you want to be. Make the right choice. Stop. Stay calm. Start thinking. A message from the Ministry of National Security's Citizen Security Program.
Thank you very much. And welcome back to Tobago CSI. For those of you who are now joining us, we are talking about child sexual abuse and incest. And before the break, we had a really kind of moving discussion happening here as we considered the abuse itself, the prevalence in Tobago, and some of the laws related to the child and how we treat with the child. So I'm certain that our studio audience have some reactions to the discussion we had earlier. And I think during the break, we had 2 young men, one from Signal Hill Secondary and one from Speyside High School who wants to comment on it. So let's take you first.
In these times, I want to ask, most males tend to compliment females. I want the officer to differentiate between complimenting and grooming. What is the difference between that?
So let me ask you, you think that complimenting is a good thing?
Actually, yes.
Yeah, so what, you think that the laws trying to interfere with that? It's a little harsh.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So we'll get him to react to that, yes? Next person.
Well, my name is Miguel Kwashe, and I'm from Speyside High School. My comment to the abuse is it have to be happening a while for her not to vent to anyone that is not happening to.
So you are recognizing that this thing had to be going on a long time. Yeah, for her not to be able to say anything now. So, officer, I want to go to you first. The question, the fellas, come on, you're dampening people's style here. We can no longer compliment a lady, make her feel good. What's it?
All right, the first thing we have to take into consideration, Anne-Marie, are two things. One, the age difference.
Right.
And two, purpose. Okay. Now, a lot of the laws we put against what we call a reasonable man test. Remember when we were speaking about remember we were speaking about abuse. We were talking about where does it border on reasonable punishment. Remember, the act talks about reasonable punishment and then it talks about cruelty. So where does it border on cruelty? Where does reasonable punishment border on cruelty? The same thing would apply here. For example, what is your purpose? But before we go to that, look at the age group. The age difference. Let's say we have a 15-year-old school child, and let's say a 29-year-old man, a 31-year-old man. What could be your possible purpose in telling a child she's beautiful? For example, quite recently we had a case of grooming where a gentleman, he's 27, and he's telling a 12-year-old, come inside by me now. You know, look how you're sweating, come and take some air condition. Now, the reasonable man looking in at that, I mean, his purpose is obvious.
Exactly.
You know, he's trying to get this girl into his apartment for another purpose.
That's right.
So, looking in at the situation, you would want to, when you hear the comments that the person making the compliment, the so-called compliment, you would listen in and you would be able to determine what is his purpose.
Right.
Is he just saying, listen, you're a bright girl, you know, you're bright.
Yes.
Or is he saying, listen, you're bright, you know, but I think I could help you. Check me later now, you know.
Right. And you see the tone changes, right?
Yes. So tone, right? So there's the tone, as opposed, and then there's the purpose, and then there's the age group. The age group is very important here. Remember, we're dealing with children. And these laws were enacted to protect our nation's children.
So we're looking at age-appropriate behaviors. And as Dr. Wheeler was saying earlier, as children, we need to be able to identify when what the person is saying to us makes us feel uncomfortable. You understand? And react to that. So I want us to bring the clip back up because now I want us to take a closer look at the child. We looked at the perpetrator before, but I want us to take a look at the child now. The expression, what's happening with that child, and how do we identify, and maybe all of you can weigh in on this as you see fit, how do we identify when this child is being abused? She's affected. How is the child affected? In what ways? Dr. Brown, you want to start?
Sure. Well, I can see that this child, she right now trusts her father, okay? And because of what he's doing, what that's doing is causing a sense of hopelessness. She's wondering, well, why does he keep doing this? If it's hurting me, why doesn't he stop? And she's probably wondering to herself, how long is this going to go on? From looking at this, I can see probably where she told the mother. And the mother told her, shut up, what are you talking about? Why are you saying those things? And maybe the mother knew, but because of the stigma attached to this, if others find out, she doesn't want anybody to know.
Right.
Well, you wonder to yourself, does she really care about her daughter? Does she care about her daughter and her future, how this is going to affect her future? In many cases, I've had a case where a child was being abused, and the mother, she's fussing out the daughter, telling her, you're stupid, why would you say something like that? Your dad would never do something like that to you. But then she never looked into it to even confront the father if this was happening. But her daughter was maybe not affected so much physically, but mentally, and even in school. Her grades were dropping. the way she started acting, she had a terrible anger, and she's lashing out at everybody. She's a bully in school because that anger, because of this unresolved issue at home, is affecting her in school and causing her to get angry with others and the teacher and not wanting to even go to school. So it affects them in other areas.
So we need to take a deeper look at the individual, the changes in behavior,
and
that we are noticing.
attitude. I think even the girl, she was bathing excessively. Sometimes that happens too. They don't want to bathe at all. They want to bathe excessively. The behavior just changes.
Okay. Officer Mills, you want to weigh in here? What do you look for? I know you interview several persons. How do you know? Because as we say, as a society, sometimes we don't believe. The children say it and we don't believe. So how do you know? What are the telltale signs, the things that you look for? How are the children affected by this?
Well, as the doctor rightly said, their behaviors change. You know, children have a tend to change and adapt to their environment and what is happening within and around them. Sometimes children would have made, you know, reports of a sexual nature, and when we interview them, you recognize that they are very reserved in what they are telling us, or they want to see, you would see that they want to say something. But one of the things is that when we're interviewing children, a parent must be present, or a guardian must be present. And a lot of the times, if the father is the would-be or the alleged perpetrator, we'd have, sometimes the father is there, or sometimes the
While
mother
you're
is
interviewing
there.
the child?
Yeah, sometimes, you know, sometimes the mother is there, sometimes another relative is there. So with that now, you have the child really afraid to say something.
Yeah.
And then when we extricate the child from that situation, when we try to get them away, they would wonder, I wonder what mommy thinking. I wonder what will happen if I say X or if I say Y. So they lock up and they go into a shell. And we have to really coax and try our best to get the information out. And then again, sometimes we get the information out, and then on another occasion the story changes. Because they would have had time to go home now and think and weigh in on the situation and look at mommy and daddy in a happier time. And they will sit in their room and say, you know, if I tell the police or if I go through this could change. This situation in my home could change because of me, and sometimes start to blame themselves for what has happened to them. So it's
I want to ask you to comment on, are there any offenses committed by the mother who knows that this is happening, or the father who knows that this is happening, the teacher, the neighbor, the who knows that this child is being sexually abused, have probably seen it and withholding that? Are they breaking any laws? Is there anything that can be done?
Right. Well, you know, the law that governs sexual intercourse and penetration and touching where children are concerned is Act 12 of 2012. Now, notwithstanding that this act has become law and is now, you know, relevant in today's society, it does not mean that any other act has been, you know, nullified or repealed. For example, the Sexual Offences Act still stands. And according to Section 31 of the Sexual Offences Act, Chapter 1128, it's clear where it says that any person at any given time, or who is or who may be at any given time in care, custody, or charge of any child in this country, if he or she so has reason to believe that a sexual crime or an offense of a sexual nature has been perpetrated against a child, whether the child tells them or whether a friend of the child says it to them or whether they just hear it, they are obligated by law, mandated according to that section, to make a report to the nearest police station or police officer, whether in or out of uniform. And failure to do so, you may be or you can be taken before the court to answer according to law. Yeah? So it is actually, you are actually breaking or breaching law when you know something, you know, is happening of a sexual nature to a child, and you withhold that information. Because I'll tell you this, this information always comes out. People always tend to believe, in my experience, if I know, nobody doesn't have to know that I know that this is happening to this child. I would like to be, you know, I would like to not be involved in this case. But sometimes, and we have seen it happen already, where children confide in, let's say, the guidance counselor, the social worker, the teacher, and the teacher fails to act. So this child now, what normally would happen, this child would go now and tell another friend. Sometimes the friend either asks, did you tell anybody? Well, I told Miss X, and Miss X didn't do anything. No, that friend now has a friend who knows a friend.
I almost
who will.
want to ask Officer Mills, are we locking up people?
Are we locking up?
Yes.
Are people being arrested?
Are people being arrested?
Well, so far, and I should say fortunately or unfortunately, we haven't had several instances where persons were arrested for not coming forward with the knowledge that they have, right? We can't say for now that there may or may not be persons with such knowledge and failing to come forward, but thus far we have not had such prevalence of of cases of that nature, which I'm happy to say.
Now, I want to open this up a little bit because we get in and are sensing some emotion running here. I want to open this up a bit. Something has to be wrong with a society that accepts all of this and keeps this secret and not talk about it and not coming forward with information. What is it about Tobago? And I know if it's one thing all of you have in common is that everybody here from Tobago. So we've grown into it. We understand our history, our culture, our norms. Are there things within us that we've been taught, we've learned, that is perpetuating this issue of abuse of our children? Dr. Wheeler?
Yes. In terms of mothers that don't say or may know, they know it's going on and they don't say anything. And this is something that is not just a Trinidad and Tobago thing, it's worldwide. It's all countries, all societies, all socioeconomic groups, all races, and so on. But in our culture, you can have mothers who, for example, they may not be married today, they may not be married, okay? Right. So the gentleman or the father figure in the household may actually be the child's stepfather. Right. And we have women here that go through a cycle. You'll have a child for this gentleman and then that relationship breaks up, it dissolves. And they move on to, have another partner who never bonded with this child or with these children. So don't view them as, my daughter, like my blood daughter, even though you have real fathers that do perpetrate it. And you actually have those children being put at risk now because you've introduced a stranger into the home who now has access to your child if they so desire, if that is their inclination. Yes. So that is something in our culture so those mothers now may feel, and the child may feel, if I say something and he has to leave, who is going to take care of us? Right. Because this person may actually be the breadwinner for the family. So there's a sense and that is something that we see. And sometimes when children don't lie, particularly young children, they tend not to lie. When a child says that, we do see a lot of different issues now where you'll have some of the older children or teenagers lying sometimes at the behest of adults around them for, in terms of custody matters and so on. But when a child says something, you really have to listen and to pay attention. But sometimes the mother may also be, if she's in this relationship, or it may be the child's father, and she trusts, a relationship is something of trust. This is somebody who loves me. This is our child together. Right. And some women may just have a problem dealing with the fact that this person who I trust would violate the parent-child trust and do this to our child. So, but women really have to pay attention. If a child says that, it may be very difficult, but you have to listen. And the worst thing for a child, no matter what happened to them, is when the parents don't believe them or the mother doesn't. It makes it harder for them to be able to deal with it when the mother does not believe. So sometimes it's, the mother may have it, probably, it's a trust issue. It may be a financial issue. Sometimes, in our culture is that, well, it's their business, you're not going and get involved in that. Same thing with domestic violence and physical abuse. You're not getting involved in that, and next thing people come and they curse you or thing. We've had one teacher who was killed years ago in Tobago because teachers are mandated to report, doctors are mandated to report as well. If you know, there's a fine and so on if you know. So, you know, in our culture, we have certain things, you know, it's the secret or the shame of it, you know, if you, something like that comes out, you know, for the child, you know, for the parent. Yeah. So we have several things that, you know, alcoholism may actually be another factor. Somebody who is drunk, you know, may be less, those are the times when the inhibitions, they may totally lose it. So if you have alcoholism in the family and, you know, that may be actually something that may encourage that type of thing. People talk about sleeping together in a bed, everybody sleeping, and different people of different children, teenagers of different sexes and so on. I really don't, I personally can't say that would necessarily lead to you having sexual activity because you have, you know, your brothers and sisters and you're all a certain age sleeping in the bed. I don't know. I don't know what Dr. Brown thinks about that.
We did that when we were little. I recall when I was little, there were about 6 of us slept in one bed.
I think if you have something going on, if people have been exposed to, then maybe that may predispose.
As we spoke about earlier, the person may be sick, the person needs help, they have issues that need to be treated with and not treated with. So culturally, we see there are some things going on there that may predispose persons to risk, but we have to be aware. We have to look, we have to listen, we have to pay attention to what our children is saying and what they're communicating to us, sometimes non-verbal, as Dr. Brown was hinting to earlier. But I want to go to First Officer Mills in relation to the issue of where do children make the report? They've recognized now something is happening, something is wrong. Can children report? Is it the parents that have to report? And where do we go from there? We have just a couple minutes to wrap up. And then, Dr. Wheeler, I want you to weigh in on, after the report has been made, what should happen? What are the precautions that should be taken to ensure that we preserve the evidence if necessary? What should be done?
Anyone can make a report to any police officer or at any police station of a nature involving children and sexual activity. The child can report, a parent or parents of a child or children can report, a friend, you know, a passerby, an acquaintance, anyone can report. We just want in knowledge as police officers. Once we become aware of the situation, then an investigation would begin and we would carry it to the very end. If it needs be counseling, if it needs be persons arrested and charged, you know, brought before the court to answer according to law or so. But I want to say this, sometimes children report in school, but because of the way they are communicating, teachers also are not aware as to what this child is trying to say. For example, we had a situation where a child would always come like every other day and she would say to Miss, last night Daddy told me he want to put money in my purse. And Miss is saying nothing wrong with that. Money in your purse is a good thing.
Yes.
Then she would come again, Miss, Daddy want to put money in my purse. He tell me he want to put some money in my purse.
Right.
Until one day, the child came, Miss, last night Daddy put money in my purse and it hurt. All the alarms went off there. Because these parents tell children how they disguise the actual names of their genital, of their private parts.
Which is the point that Dr. Wheeler was making earlier.
You know, so I want to strongly advise parents, listen, these parts have names. Tell the children the correct name for their body parts, please. There's a penis, there's a vagina. Nothing is wrong.
Yes.
You know, these cocolooks and you know, these names that we disguise because we don't want to be we don't want to sound so raw to our children. You know, I mean, children need to know what their body parts are, and they need to know that these parts shall and must only be touched or interacted with by them.
That's right.
By them.
Yeah.
And so when children are unaware of the correct name, they would not be able to say, okay.
Right.
You know, so we need to be careful as parents. You know, and that is part of the culture as well. You know, we always like to disguise names. You gotta be careful. We really need to be careful, especially in these days. at this
Okay.
time.
So, Dr. Wheeler, come in here. The abuse has happened. I'm the child. I've been sexually abused. What should
Right,
happen?
what happens? Well, as you said, 9 times out of 10, most times it's not a violent act.
Yeah.
If it's a violent act and, you know, somebody sees a child bleeding or the child says they're hurting or somebody notices a discharge, you would want to do one or two things. You know, you can go to a doctor, you can go to a health center, you can go to the hospital. You know, it depends on how urgent it is. If it was the child was raped and they're bleeding, they would usually end up at the hospital. Right. In a case like that, which is acute, the police would really they would be called in because they would need to be there to collect evidence. Because you may be able to get, whether it's semen or, you know, that you would want to process and so on. Most of the cases, unfortunately, that is not how it happens. It's maybe how, you know, as you mentioned, a situation like this, unless they come the next day and said this happened last night, you may be able to get evidence. But usually it may be something that may happen a week, a month ago. So there is no chain of evidence really to collect in a case like that. What you're going to be doing is examining the child to see if you find any physical, you know, changes. And you may not find anything. All right, you may find abnormalities on examination. It doesn't necessarily mean that the child was sexually abused. Or you may not find anything, which does not mean that the child was not sexually abused. Yes. So it's not easy in that sense. So you really look at, you know, what the child says. Okay, and then sometimes children may actually they come to see the doctor. They're having headaches all the time. They're having belly pains all the time. They're getting urine infection, bladder infections all the time. They have some other issue that they're presenting with. Well, what is really behind it is that the child is being abused. All right, you may have a child who may say, well, they're having seizures, but the seizures are not real seizures. All right, so, you know, other physical things in addition to, you know, all of a sudden not doing well in school, you know, some things that they may find, like that particular video that you had, that teenager may start to have a problem when her mother leaves. She doesn't want to be left alone with the person. You know, little children. So there's all of a sudden they don't want anxiety or separation. They get afraid. You know, they don't want the mother to leave them alone or to leave them or they don't want to go into a particular person. Or, you know, or their behavior changes. You know, little children all of a sudden. You had a child who was they stop wetting bed and everything. They toilet trained. And all of a sudden, they're 6 years old, 7, all of a sudden they start wetting the bed. All of a sudden, out of the blue, you know, or they just start sucking their thumb out of the blue, all of a sudden, never used to do that before. So there are different ways, you know, that children, you know, and I mean, those things can be caused by other issues, but they may also be, you know, signs of a child who is being abused.
Okay, so it's important we pay attention to everything.
Yeah, and it's not easy in situations like that. Little children who they may not even know the words. You know, there are different things you can use dolls. You can use different things to find, you know, if they open up to find out what it is that is happening with them.
Okay, great. Okay. We must go to break right now. When we return, we engage our studio audience and they get an opportunity to ask some questions and get their answers clarified here today. Thank you. You're listening to Tobago CSI and we're talking about the issue of child sexual abuse and incest.
I'm Samantha John.
I am Nadia Batson.
The incredible Myron B.
I'm K.I. Chucky Gordon.
Hi, my name is Sheriff.
And we are Freetown.
And I'm urging each and every citizen of our beautiful country.
It's time for us to put a stop to crime and violence in Trinidad and Tobago once and for all.
In Freetown, we believe that every citizen has the right to life.
We need to be responsible, not only for ourselves, but for others as well.
I think the only way to counteract any kind of fear is to inject love.
We have the power to stand up, to unite, to stay positive, and to win back our country.
Build a culture of
lawfulness, peace, respect, love, harmony.
The Citizen Security Program.
Stop the violence and abuse.
Stop the violence and abuse.
Stay calm.
Stay calm. Stay calm.
Stay calm and start thinking.
Start thinking.
And start thinking.
A message from the Citizen Security Program. Stop the violence and abuse. Stay calm and start thinking.
Thank you very much. And welcome to Tobago CSI. We've been talking about child sexual abuse and incest, and the issues raised here. The conversation has been really good. And we hope that those of you who are listening at home, that we begin to break the silence surrounding the issue of child sexual abuse and incest. But for now, we're going to the audience. We have some questions that we want to pose to the panel. And during the break, I had a chance to chat with these students here. And panel, you had better get ready. These questions are tough. So let's go to our audience right now because I want to be among them. Okay, so who has our first question? Let's start with you. Tell us your name.
My name is Danique Edwards and I'm in Form 6.
Oh, great. You have a question for our panel this morning?
Yes.
All right. Tell us.
My question is relating to what Officer Mills said with the female being 15 and the male was 29. But what if the male was a teenager? Would it still be an offense?
The Children's Act 12 of 2012 applies to both male and female children. It talks about the age of a child, anyone under the age of 18 years of 18 years old. So whether it's female or male, it will apply either way. You know? Yeah.
So I think she's asking if the perpetrator is also under the age of 18. Yeah. Does it apply?
Section 20. Now, to go through the entire act with ticks, we could do a whole show on that. But I would like to guide them to Section 20. The act is readily available on the internet. You could download it, Act 12 of 2012. All you have to do is type it in Trinidad and Tobago and you will get it, Google. Section 20 is what we call or what we refer to as the Romeo Clause. And it deals with that question, the age differences of children and the decriminalizing of sexual intercourse between children. You know, so it gives like a person 16, there's no offense if he or she has sexual intercourse with a person 14. You know, it varies the ages right down up to 12 because it says that a child under the age of 12 is incapable of committing a crime. There's no crime under 12, right?
Right. Okay, so let's take our next question. You are?
Natoya Geoffrey from Signal Hill Secondary School. I'm in 6th form.
Okay, great. And what's your question?
The question I have for you guys is, what if the child initiates into the act and the adult gives into the situation? What would this result in? Or I should rather ask, what would the fine be?
You have to look at why would the child do that? You know, is it that something has happened to them? And they know, I mentioned that one of the things that happens with children who have been sexually abused is that they become, you can say, the word you use, promiscuous, okay? They then become sexually active, very sexually active with other persons as well. And people say, oh, she hot and so on, so on, so on. But it's because of what happened to that child, why they are like that.
Okay.
And also, in a situation like that, for a child to initiate that with a parent, what is the relationship? You know, if you're talking about a parent or uncle, what is that relationship that the child would do that? But the responsibility is really on the part of the adult, because a child may do something and the adult has to guide the child in the appropriate, you know, what is appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate. So the adult is going to be responsible, whether the child initiated or not, it or not. The adult has to be responsible for their actions.
Right.
You know, if they participate in a situation like that.
Right. And Officer Mills, just quickly confirm here, who will be charged?
I'm happy that she mentioned what would the fine be, because there would be a fine. As a matter of fact, the child initiates, the act says penetration of a child, sexual penetration of a child. So the adult initiates. Once there was sexual intercourse, it's sexual penetration of a child. The child initiates. Once there was sexual intercourse, it's still sexual penetration of a child. Right. And the adult would be the perpetrator and would be the one, you know, responsible.
My name is Racy Robert. I am from Speyside High School. I'm repeating in 5th form. My question for you guys is, if the victim and the perpetrator end up in counseling, right? So the perpetrator bribes the child before they enter into the counseling room by like giving him snack and them kind of thing, you know, to bribe him so that he will lie to the counselor that the abuse stop. How will you know as a counselor that, you know, the abuse is still going on?
Okay, Dr. Brown, this is up your alley.
Okay, well, first of all, you need to realize that if the story just changes all of a sudden, then something is wrong. A trained counselor will continue to work with them, probably work with them separately, and take the child aside and talk to her or him, and then with the perpetrator as well. Counseling just doesn't happen like that. Usually 4 to 6 months, sometimes a year, people are in counseling. But I would say in a situation like that, you would be able to tell. A trained counselor could just tell if the child is lying, or if the child is being bribed, if the child feels threatened. And that will come out in the counseling, and you would deal with those situations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have another question from Speyside High School.
My name is Nathan, and I would just like to ask you a question. If, in the case of a parent pawning off their child to someone else or a predator, who gets the stiffer charge? Does the parent get the stiffer charge for pawning off their child, or does the perpetrator get the charge for actually committing the act?
Okay, Officer Mills?
In law, there are several different charges, several different offenses. Now, between section 10 all the way to, I think it's section 14 or 15, there's something what they call child prostitution. And it speaks to that. A parent pawning off or selling or giving his or her child or children off to someone to be, you know, sexually molested for either reward via monetarily or otherwise. It comes under prostitution or child prostitution. So the parent or parents would have breached the law there and would be called upon to answer to a charge to be dealt with according to law. The perpetrator, or the one who is receiving the children for the sexual purpose or purposes, they would also be dealt with according to law. So it's not like, or it's not a case where, okay, the parent will get something stiffer, a stiffer penalty, and the perpetrator will get another penalty. Both persons, we will look, you know, sometime during the investigation, we would look and we would see exactly what offenses have been breached, what law or laws have been breached, and we would, you know, prosecute accordingly.
My name is Joel Thorpe. I'm from St. Leonard's Secondary School. And my question is, for instance, if the child is enjoying it and the parent caught them in a compromising situation and the child decides to withhold information, would there be a penalty towards the child?
So this is an interesting one. Now, business happening. Parent comes in and catches both persons in the act, child and the other parent. But the child is deciding to withhold the information. That's a scenario.
We have had cases and scenarios like that already. And the unfortunate thing is that our evidence depends heavily. A successful prosecution of the perpetrator depends heavily on the evidence from the child. Now, the parent is also mandated to make a report, as I mentioned before. However, the parent saying what he or she sees would not be of enough grounds to prosecute an offender. We would need. Now, we have ways in getting the information from the child or from the children, you know, but our evidence and our case depends heavily on the information, a statement on the account of the encounter, the sexual encounter from that child. And sorry to say, without that, there are other measures that we can take. There's counseling, but we would continue to work with the child. The thing about it is, there is no statute of limitations on sexual sexual crimes.
Offenses?
Yes, sexual
well,
offenses.
That's good news.
Right? So, at any given time, any time thereafter, if that child decides, listen, I'm done carrying this burden, I think I need to say something.
That's very good news. And I think we have one
forward.
final question, and we'll take it quickly because I'm sure we're running out of time now. From Speyside High School.
My name is Miguel Koshi, and I am from Speyside High School. And my question is, what can a teenager like myself do to protect themselves from any type of sexual action if they are threatened and afraid to let anyone know? What can they do to protect themselves if perhaps they aren't showing any action or clues that they are being troubled?
Okay, good. That's a good one. How does the child protect themselves? What can they do? And maybe I'll ask both Dr. Brown and Officer Mills to just give us a quick answer.
Okay, well, first of all, if someone is making advances at you or you feel that you're being threatened, you need to tell somebody that you trust. That is number one. And then make sure that you protect yourself by knowing good touch. It depends on the child. If someone your age, you need to tell someone, tell a counselor, let someone know, and let them know who the person is. And the more that you trust somebody and you divulge the information, then the more people that know you can be protected.
Okay, Officer Mills?
Yeah, and also if this teenager is afraid of being attacked or otherwise by the perpetrator or perpetrators, he needs to make a report as soon as possible.
Yeah.
The police are here for you. And this is what we want children to understand. We are here for the children. We are the child protection unit.
That's right.
That's our name. That's what we're about, protecting children. So make a report. Feel free to call our office or offices, you know, and we would help you. We work with the Children's Authority.
Yes.
If needs be, you can be placed in what we call a place of safety that only the Children's Authority and a few of the officers, you know, would be aware. And based on the situation, your family may or may not know where you are, but you will be well taken care of, well protected. And, you know, the necessary steps will be put in place.
That's good
At the end of the day,
news.
when you give your information, we want you to give your information knowing fully well that, listen, I can give my information and not have to go through any kind of adverse consequence or consequences. That's what we want. And that's what I'm sure that's what you will want as well.
All right, so that was excellent. Let's give yourselves a round of applause. Very well. Nice. And you know, if I were you, I would be feeling real good now because according to Officer Mills, you have your own private police force, the Child Protection Unit, and they're here for you. So let's wrap it up now. We go back on stage and take in final comments from our panel. Sharon, I want to start with you because you have just 1 minute. You tell us. I want to start with you because we talked about a lot of situations happening there. What's happening with the child? What's the final comment you have in moving forward?
Well, children who've been affected by child abuse, only life can tell how it's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. And child abuse is never easy to discuss. It's never easy to talk about or to deal with. But once you see a child that you feel is being hurt or abused in any way, it's the responsibility of everybody. Teacher, pastor, caretaker, whoever you are, to make that report. And I think after today, we've received so much information that those reports need to be made. And remember that you could be making a difference in a child forever.
That's right. Dr. Wheeler?
I think I would endorse that. You know, we have to be our brother's keeper. So if you have, you have a friend, it could be somebody in school or anything, if you're aware of anything, to say something. And, it may not be easy for a child or a teenager to just go to the police station. There are numbers, there's Childline. You can get the number online that you can call if you're not sure what to do, and you can speak to someone and they will tell you, what you could do. There's also the Children's Authority. They have numbers, they have a hotline that you can call, but we really, as a society, look out for each other. It's not something that, don't feel, or even if it's you that are going through this, and you feel, well, I'll just live with it and then it will go away. It doesn't, it stays for you, even as an adult, it will have an effect and can have lasting effects.
And I agree with you. There's much more help available right now, so don't be afraid. We'll put the numbers up at the end of the program so that you will know who you can call. Officer Mills?
I want to reiterate the point that knowledge is power. And I said that to say that the law is available to any individual within this entire country. It's freely available. Download it, Act 12 of 2012, and go through it. There are several new offenses that, that are in this piece of legislation that persons need to be aware of, so you can, better be suited and better be equipped and ready to treat with issues that are affecting our children. Our children are our future, and we have to protect them. We have to protect them at whatever cost. Yeah. So we want to ensure that persons come forward with reports throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Let us know what's happening. All we need is the information. We don't even need your name. Right. All right? And we will take it from there and ensure that our children get the justice that they need, and that perpetrators are brought to justice, whatever the crime.
All right. So I want to thank you very much. I think you've shared such valuable information here today. We know, I'm not even hoping, I know it will make a difference and change things around as it regards to the abuse of our children. And let's start protecting our children as we go forward. I want to thank you for your contributions here today. I want to thank the audience for your participation. We're going to go to break right now. And when we return, we have a special surprise for you.
No, I'm not ready for that. No.
Stop. Stay calm. Start thinking.
Okay, cool.
Later.
A message from the Ministry of National Security's Citizen Security Program.
Live a life of indiscretion, awareness,
Thank you, and welcome back to Tobago CSI. As we do our close-off for today, we have a special surprise for our studio audience who has been so very great today. We had students from Speyside High School and from Signal Hill Secondary School, and we have a special gift offer from Heritage Sport, keeping you off the bench and in the game. That sounds good, right? Yes, so the person who is sitting on our hot seat today, we're going to pick number 30. Who has number 30? Just check behind your seats. Quick. Number 30, come on up. Come here. So tell us your name and what form you're in. Just go on.
My name is Amanda Job, and I am in 5th form.
Okay, so thank you very much, Amanda, on behalf of the Heritage Sport. Thank you for being on Tobago CSI today. Okay, that's great. So there you have it, folks. This has been another episode of Tobago CSI, brought to you courtesy the Citizen Security Program. I was your host, Anne-Marie Degazo. We discussed the issue of child sexual abuse and incest, and now we have enough information so that we can start the process of breaking this cycle of abuse that has been pervading our Tobago communities. As we go, remember to share the love, stop the violence and abuse, stay calm, and start thinking. We go out now with a spoken word performance from our young breakout artist, Miss Cindy Andrews. Let's bring her on set.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. The name of the piece is called Storytime. I once clung to once upon a time stories, thinking that once upon a time life was just a bed of roses. Then seasons changed and thorns pricked skin and drew blood as roses lost petals, and I awoke to a terrible dream that seemed okay because bad things just happened in stories. Once upon a time I thought you were comfort and safety, but it was you that sought comfort from my little hands and lips and hips that hadn't begun to fill, but still to you I was your bed of roses, a springtime away from blooming, so you sought to groom me, uproot me, and plant me where you saw it fit. You called me your little flower garden, so every evening you took me to Granny's garden to teach me how to plant your favorite seeds, but it was to my amazement that seeds never found soil, but instead soiled my hands, and no amount of fertilizer could ever make me feel as dirty as you did with your sweet kisses. You called them your love buds. So every night you tried to give me love buds before you put me to bed, and I tried to remember where in Sleeping Beauty did the prince lay his head between the princess's legs to wake her, or when did the 7 dwarfs who protected Snow White take turns trying to sodomize her. But like the good storyteller you were, mother, You pretended that these were all illusions I conjured from an overactive imagination and accidentally stumbling into my brother's porn stash at age 6. So you fixed every problem I brought to you with the Nile the river, which helped Grandpa to keep our little garden alive. He said I was his little garden princess just like my mother before me, and that he hoped my cousins and brothers protected me the same way my mothers did. And I just wanted to shout it and say you fibbed, but I had been pinned down yet again by Snow Wife's dwarves awaiting another visit from Prince Charming, so much that I wished I had never asked to play Little Red Riding Hood and visit grandmother's house, for it was this time that Grandpa played master planter, fertilizing the one flower that should have stayed unpollinated. I once cling to once upon a time stories, thinking that once upon a time life was just a bed of roses. Then seasons changed, and out of my garden sprung a weed of my grandfather's deed, the product of his labor bore fruit within me, and I was left not as a little flower garden, nor a garden princess, but as another unreported child abuse and incest statistic.
Retrospection, got an answered question. I'm looking for a new direction. Live a life of indiscretion, awareness misdirected. Can you tell me what's the lesson?